Good afternoon, my name is Andrew Ponton and I apologize for not being able to make the Oslo Zday event in person. I am from Australia and today is my only opportunity to see a live ski jumping event in Norway. This is definitely not the type of stuff that we do back in Australia, so I'm really interested in checking it out. The title of this presentation is A Context for Sustainability. I am going to describe to you a context in which human beings can live together in a sustainable manner. Before doing this, however, I will need to outline some common problems that we face. A term that I will use a lot in this presentation is socio-economic system. This is the combination of our social system and our economic system. As we will explore, the economic component to the socio-economic system has a huge influence on the way people interact with each other and on how nations interact with each other. The economic component of our current socio-economic system is a market system based on human labor. This has been the case for a very, very long time. Market systems are great in that it provides incentive for people to exchange goods and services, but there are also some underlying aspects that are actually quite negative. Three negative presuppositions of a market system are: 1. The competition for resources. 2. The incentive for corruption. 3. The formation of classes. If we just have a look at that first one, the competition for resources is evident on the micro scale, as individuals may compete with each other for any scarce resource that may be beneficial for them financially. Companies compete with each other, corporations compete with each other, and even on a macro scale, we see nations are provided with the incentive to compete with each other for profitable resources. Unfortunately, war is an inevitable consequence for having a system that has inbuilt incentives for the competition for resources, as war essentially is the competition for resources on an international level. The incentive for corruption is also evident in many different levels of the social system. Most often in cases of corruption, there are financial rewards for the corrupt behavior. Though morality is very much an issue in these cases, we cannot overlook the fact that there are inherent incentives in the market system for corrupt behavior. In fact, in some white-collar crime cases, the reward for the corrupt behavior is the power to make sure that you are not punished for the corrupt behavior. The third presupposition is the formation of classes. Class stratification is the natural gravitation in a market system type of setup. The hierarchical triangle symbolism that we often see is not only evident in businesses, where we have the CEO on top with the low-income workers on the bottom, whilst the middle is occupied by different levels of management. We also see this within countries, with the better players of this game of market system occupying the upper classes, while the other players occupy the middle and the lower classes. This type of setup also essentially gives power to those in the upper classes, as the money resides in the upper classes. Even in today's democratic practices, the fact that presidential campaigns rely on financial contributions gives all the power to those with the serious cash. The point is that class stratification is a natural outcome in a system based on market. Here's a thought experiment. Imagine that you are a social scientist and we're conducting an experiment in the forest. We have 1,000 participants and the experiment is to allow them to live in a market system while we observe their behavior. Given those three presuppositions that I outlined earlier, there is a series of predictions that we can make on the behavior of these participants. Given enough time, we will see the competition for resources. We will see examples of corruption, and we will see the formation of classes, as the better players in the game of market system come to occupy the upper classes. This is simply the natural progression of market systems. And if we allow this experiment to run for, say, 10,000 years, what we end up with is a society that is not that much different from the society that we have today. So clearly this is not the ideal context for a sustainable habitat. Well, let us consider another thought experiment. This photo is actually a photo of Mars. It was taken by the Mars rover Spirit in 2006. It depicts a Martian sunrise. Imagine that you are an astronaut and you're part of a colony of astronauts sent out to colonize Mars. We are to stay and live on Mars for, say, a couple of years, collecting data before heading back to Earth. Would we expect this colony of astronauts to engage in a market system for their survival? Would we expect them to enter into the game of trading goods and services in order for them to have food on their tables at the end of the day? No, we wouldn't expect this. What we would expect is technical life-supporting systems in place, freeing them to be astronauts. And let us be clear, this is not a market system that these people would be living in. It would be called an access system, where the individuals have access to the necessities of life without being subjected to labor and without having a financial restriction on these goods and services. This brings about a different set of predictions when we try to imagine what type of social system would arise in an access system. For example, would they compete for resources? Would there be incentive for corruption? Would class stratification emerge? I highly doubt that, but I can't know for sure. What I do know for sure, though, is that it would be a lot easier to deal with these issues in a system of access rather than a system of market. Now imagine that we take this same logic and apply the tools of science and technology into designing a society here on Earth, a society based on the intelligent management of the Earth's resources through a system of access rather than market, and based on mechanized labor and automation rather than on human labor. Let's be serious. An access system cannot work based on human labor. They've tried that in the past and it didn't work. Maybe on a very small scale, like a family for example, then an access system may be able to work on human labor. In fact, this is the case in many families today. But in a world with 7 billion people, even in a country of 7 million people, an access system is not functional based on human labor. It needs to be mechanized, and it can be. Those who think that global sustainability can be achieved in the context of a market system tend to imagine every country becoming more or less like Scandinavia, where we have free healthcare, free education, and a heavy reliance on renewable resources. Trust me, I support this endeavor. If put to a vote, I would vote for this. But even in this context, there are still some problems that make market systems obsolete in the 21st century. Automation and mechanization will continue to progress, taking away more jobs in the process. The whole point of automating your company is so that you get to pay less people, whilst increasing your productivity. To maintain a competitive edge, companies will have to automate their workers, thus reducing the purchasing power of their citizens, who in effect are unable to purchase the goods or services being made available to them through these companies. I'll just say that again. To maintain a competitive edge, companies will have to automate their workers, thus reducing the purchasing power of their citizens, who in effect are unable to purchase the goods or services being made available to them through these companies. Some people call this the contradiction of capitalism, but I like to call it the contradiction of market systems. At some point in the 21st century, there will not be enough jobs to hold up the economy. An economy based on trading goods and services with human labor as the foundation anyway. This is obsolete thinking. The whole point of technology is to alleviate human labor, not to move human labor into other sectors that will eventually be automated anyway. We're propping up an outdated system, but more so, we're propping up an outdated way of thinking. As a species, we're a lot better than this. To quote Vandana Shiva, nature shrinks as capital grows. The growth of the market cannot solve the very crisis that it creates. So far, I have not mentioned the Zeitgeist movement, which is basically one of the organizations promoting this train of thought, this context for sustainability, this idea of an access system based on automation replacing a market system based on human labor. I have not mentioned the Zeitgeist movement because it is the underlying ideas that are important, not the organization or the person communicating it. These ideas are separate from the Zeitgeist movement, and they are separate from myself. In short, you do not need to be part of any organization to promote these ideas or to subscribe to these ideas. But if you are interested in more videos about this train of thought, the Zeitgeist movement is a useful search term to use on YouTube. Thank you for listening to this presentation, and I would just like to end with a quote from Bill Hicks. I do not believe that making money in order to consume goods is mankind's sole purpose on this planet. If you're wondering what I believe our purpose on this planet is, I'll give you a hint. It has to do with creating and sharing. Thanks for listening.